Well, a fiery question time today as the opposition targeted the Transport Minister Catherine King over the government's decision to block Qatar Airways' request for 28 extra flights in and out of Australia, a move that would have lowered the cost of travelling. We also saw yesterday the stunning admission from Anthony Albanese that he had consulted with Virgin about the Qatar Airways decision, despite saying earlier that he had nothing to do with the call.
Did the Prime Minister have any conversations with the CEO or any senior executive of Virgin Australia regarding the Qatar application before the decision was made?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
Yes.
Well, and we found out today that actually he'd had that conversation 3 days after the decision was made. He was entertaining the Virgin CEO, listening to her speak about the request for their international partner, Qatar Airways, to have more international flights in and out of the country. He never told her that the decision had been made 3 days earlier. He claims he didn't know it had been made. Well, joining me now is National Senator for Queensland, Matt Canavan. Matt, as we went to air last night, the Coalition had won their vote to have a Senate inquiry into the government's decision to block Qatar Airways from those extra flights. I'm just getting breaking news right now that actually Labor is now trying to amend the terms of reference of the Qantas committee that was agreed to in the Senate yesterday. So this was won by a vote last night. We broke the news on air. Now Labor is trying to amend the terms of reference to expand the scope to go back to 2016 and to have less focus on their Qantas Qatar issue. This will now have to go to another vote. It's on the notice paper for tomorrow. That's my understanding. What is your reaction to this?
Look, I'm learning for the first time myself, Shari, these things come out about now every day for the next day's sitting. So that's, well, I mean, it's not surprising from the Labor Party. They've obviously got things to hide here about this decision. Their story changes every day. The reasons for the decision changes every week, and they won't be fulsome with their answers. I mean, my understanding is the Minister King today in the lower house wouldn't answer simple questions about who she spoke to, who she consulted with before the decision. And the Australian people deserve answers. They deserve answers. Obviously, the government here is trying to say, oh, well, other decisions were made like this in the past, but the past was a very different place. Right now, the situation is people are paying 50% more for their flights to go home and visit loved ones overseas. Right now, we're seeing a dominant airline carrier in Qantas treat their customers like absolute rubbish. And there needs to be a response right now by this government. This government is in power. They should be held to account by the Australian people, by the Senate. I think it was very disappointing yesterday to see the Greens Party team up with the Labor Party to run a protection racket for Qantas. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. But clearly, the government is very, very nervous about answering questions on this because they've got a very cosy relationship with Qantas and with big business.
Well, yes. I mean, how risky is this for Anthony Albanese personally? He's the Prime Minister. He's categorically in Parliament said that he never spoke to Qantas about this Qatar Airways decision. Are we expected to believe that Catherine King made this decision all on her own?
Well, I still think there's a lot of questions that haven't been answered. Did Qantas speak to anyone in Mr Albanese's office? Did they relay that information to the Prime Minister through the office? As you said, we haven't, I don't think, got a clear answer on whether or not Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister, spoke to Catherine King before the decision. He may not have known when the decision was actually made, but that's different from whether he did actually speak to her. It seems very unusual. The decision-making process within this government, at the very least, seems chaotic. I mean, this is a major decision, as I say, about a huge cost of living issue for Australians. If they didn't know, they should have known that this would have a massive public reaction, a massive public concern about the decision. And the fact that they don't seem, or the Minister and the Prime Minister doesn't seem to have taken on themselves to consult across the government with relevant portfolios is a shocking indictment of their decision-making processes if we're to believe their story.
Now, the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, today announced a new Productivity Commission Chair, Danielle Woods, after Chris Barrett decided that he was no longer going to accept the role. Matt Canavan, look, you've done some digging into the new Productivity Commission Chair, Danielle Woods. She was from the Grattan Institute. What do we know about her quite radical policy positions?
Well, I thought this was a very strange decision. There had been an appointment made just a matter of weeks ago, and that person apparently has pulled out. And now we've got an appointment of this Miss Wood. She as you say, she's been leading up the Grattan Institute. They're a left-wing think tank, and she's in that role expressed pretty left-wing policy views. She's written pieces supporting death duties, for example. She's written pieces calling for a 15% GST, for a carbon tax, for massive increase in government spending. She's criticised the WA GST deal, which I'm sure will be of some concern to WA Labor members and senators. So I'm not sure what due diligence seems to have been a very rushed decision here made. But the most important thing we can do for the Australian economy right now is to get productivity growth going again. One of the reasons inflation's so high, that interest rates have to be so high, is because our productivity growth has fallen by more than 4% over the past year. And none of these policies, like raising taxes on people, seem to me to be a good solution to productivity. So I'm pretty concerned here that the government's seeking to push the Productivity Commission, an eminent part of our policy-making mix. They're trying to push it in the left-wing direction with a radical agenda that is not going to help our economy.
All right, Senator Matt Canavan, thank you very much for joining me.